Thank you all for coming. I'm so happy to see such a vital, chatty crowd.
Well, no, Sarah's 32.
This is the very last installment of our Ink on Shrink series. We'll be sad to see the shrink writing go. I had a thought, just watching some of the audience members come in. We have a student who is married to a mortician, and we have a forensic psychologist in the audience, so maybe the next one will be Ink on Death. So we had a wonderful open house here tonight, and just wheeling the chair around the corner is Nick Mangano, the new MFA director of our, I always say that wrong, he's the director of the Theater and Film Master's Degree Program.
Well done.
Bob Reeves is here as well. We have a bunch of those students in the audience. Two of our very fine teachers will be reading tonight. Roger Rosenblatt, Professor Emeritus.
No, dude, that means you retired. And I looked at it.
And Denisha Smith, right in front of me, who's a very new and recent hire. Very happy to have her with us. Really great news on our trips to Florence and Kenya. Both of them are booked. The conferences are completely filled up. Classes are completely filled up. All the poets are going to Africa in the midst of a war. I'm very proud of our The next spring, we're going to have a new Writer Speak series, which will be in part hosted by Daniel Menaker. Dan was the editor-in-chief of the fiction section of the New Yorker for 20 years, and we're going to have a series of readings called A Point of View on a Point of View, which will be how he discovered and brought in new writers over that period of time. Very excited about that. Finally, to introduce tonight's readers is a student here in the program. Her name is Genevieve Crane. Genevieve is writing a short fiction collection about loss of control. And she should know about it because she's been TA to both of these instructors.
I have had the complete luck and pleasure of working as a TA for both Denisha Smith and Roger Rosenblatt. Denisha is so technologically competent that she hardly needed me. I made a photocopy here and there. I sent the occasional email on her behalf. But Roger, on the other hand, let's just say the man doesn't believe in email. He would call me every week with a task of translating his words into mysterious internet format for the class. I think he was under the impression that he was bothering me. He couldn't be more mistaken. I had known before taking courses with either of them that Roger and Denisha were brilliant writers. It was a wonderful surprise when I discovered what brilliant professors they are as well. Roger and Denisha teach with an enormous generosity of time, wisdom, and encouragement. And I'm not sure if they realize this, but they actually tend to distribute the same sage advice in their classrooms. Roger tells the students to stick to the facts and tell the story. Denisha warns her students about the perils of fancy writing. Roger quotes Twain. The right word, he says, is the difference between the lightning and the lightning bug. In two of my manuscripts that Denisha has edited, I've received comments with a word circled and the careful scrawl in the corner. Are you sure this is the right word? She's right. It's never exactly the right word. They both value the piercing precision of language, a belief that shows in their own work. They are unfaltering when it comes to clarity. They are creatures of realism. They produce the sort of work, both in journalism and in literature, that can bring a reader to their knees. And now I have a confession to make. I initially tried to avoid learning about Roger and Denisha's countless accolades. I was afraid that if I had seen their many successes on paper before I met them, I'd be too intimidated to utter a single word in the classroom. I'm glad that I made this decision, but now that I know them personally, I think it's safe to brag about them. Denisha Smith is a novelist, journalist, and filmmaker. Her most recent novel, The Illusionist, was a New York Times Notable Book of the Year. Her writing has won her many awards, including fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Ingram Merrill Foundation. She's been a contributor to New York Magazine and worked as a cultural correspondent for the New York Times for 11 years. Roger Rosenblatt is an essayist, novelist, and playwright. Of his most recent works, both Lapham Rising and Making Toast were national bestsellers. Town and Country has referred to him as the finest essayist in the country. His upcoming January 2012 publication, Kayak Morning, has already earned a Publisher's Weekly starred review. For tonight's Ink on Shrinks reading, Denisha will be reading from a New York Magazine article entitled What Would Freud Think, and Roger will be discussing his upcoming publication, Kayak Morning. Please welcome Denisha Smith.
Okay, I'm going to read from an article I wrote about far too long ago, in 1986. I updated it, about an uproar in the New York Psychoanalytic Institute, which is the premier institute, or was, yes, right, was. And it started this way. Let's begin by just talking about the power of analysis. Those of you who didn't live in New York City in the post-war period could probably not understand the power that the figure of the psychoanalyst exerted over the culture, writers and novelists in particular. The analyst would sit there like a Tao emperor, delivering the occasional enigmatic aphorism or two, if you were lucky, exerting his power through silence, abstention, and mystery. He didn't talk about his personal life, so the patient, writer or novelist, lying on the couch and pouring out his soul, was left to wonder if the analyst was married, had children, had ever suffered from depression, had ever himself actually had sex. To some extent, the analysts cultivated this power. Some, like my own, enhanced their majesty further with the decor of their offices, copying the furnishings of the master Freud, draping their couches in oriental rugs with pre-Columbian Greek and Roman artifacts scattered about, and lovely oil paintings, in a kind of Victorian splendor. But then, as these psychoanalysts began to be threatened by science, some of the offices and waiting rooms became quite sterile, with neutral-colored walls and furnishings, and the occasional non-confrontational trio or Picasso line drawing, making the analyst seem more unknowable. One scholar of psychoanalysis, Dr. Leo Stone, told me that at the time I was writing the article, he said, there was once the belief that one shouldn't even have pictures in the office. Anyway, another analyst told me, I have colleagues who, if a patient walked in with his head completely covered in bandages, wouldn't say a word. Sorry. Okay. When the patient did spot his analyst outside the world, and the outside world, at a party or a concert, there was excitement. Here was the godlike figure in an earthly setting. Did he have a wife and real children, not just the patient child himself? The result of this were some memorable characters in the post-war novel. Dr. John Ray in Lolita, whom Humbert loved to bait. I discovered there was an endless source of robust enjoyment in trifling with psychiatrists, leading them on, Humbert says, inventing for them elaborate dreams, teasing them with fake primal scenes. In Iris Murdoch's Severed Head and Erica Jones' Fear of Flying, the psychiatrists bed their female patients. And of course, in Portnoy's Complaint, Dr. O. Spielvogel listens without interruption to Portnoy's long declaration of woe, and then utters a single sentence. Now, we may perhaps to begin. Yes. And then we have our colleague and my friend Daniel Menaker's The Treatment, and his psychoanalyst, Dr. Morales, is a sort of scorched earth type. As one critic put it, a comic Jewish nightmare, ruthless in his methods. Anyway, for years after World War II, analysts ruled like kings over the departments of psychiatry. In 1961, the New York Psychoanalytic Society gave itself a 50th birthday party at the Pierre Hotel, and its members performed a song and dance review with songs such as, "Don't Take the Lid Off My Id," "Come to Me, My Symbiotic Baby," and "You Can't Eat Your Mother and Have Her Too." Anyway, they were dancing and singing at this party. One song went as follows. Our silences and nods should be very much like God's. We should be learned as well as wise, with high IQs and with piercing eyes. So, in 1986, when I was at New York Magazine, a friend of mine, an analyst, a female, suggested I do a story about the New York Psychoanalytic Institute. My friend was a loyal member of the place, despite the fact that she was a woman, and through sheer strength and intelligence had battled her way through Harvard Medical School, then penetrated another fortress of power, the Institute itself. She told me a group of psychologists were suing the Institute, challenging its policies of admitting mostly medical doctors for training. Freud himself had said psychoanalysis is not a particular branch of medicine, and his own daughter Anna, a psychoanalyst, wasn't even a doctor. It sounded like a good story. I approached the Institute, the analysts, perhaps feeling isolated, or maybe because they wanted to make their case, opened their doors to me. The result was a shock. I discovered they didn't even want to talk about the psychologist's lawsuit. What they wanted to talk about was how mad they were at each other about the climate of intimidation that had arisen in the Institute and the rule by dictatorial oligarchy. The chairman of the Institute's faculty told me, I'm kept awake all night long, there's so much tension. One senior analyst called his adversary a communist. Another complained that his main opponent had once dated Jean Kirkpatrick. She is now dead, but she was head of President Reagan's National Security Council. Watch out for him, one man said of another. Every time he clears his throat, he's going to betray you. Well, and what were they complaining about? It turned out it was about something called training analysts. A training analyst was a senior analyst who analyzed the candidates who wanted to be analysts. Training analysts were nominated by a faculty committee of the all-powerful education committee. They didn't get paid more. In fact, they put in more hours teaching and supervising candidates as they practiced their own art on their own patients. But they had power. At the time I wrote the articles, psychoanalysis had begun its long decline. Psychopharmacology was coming into its own. Newer therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy were emerging. The women's movement had affected psychoanalysis prestige. Some of Freud's views on women seemed utterly ridiculous to a big part of the population. And with inflation and busy two-career families, fewer people could spend 4 or 5 mornings a week in offices up and down Park and Fifth Avenue, undergoing the slow, arduous process of psychoanalysis. So, if you were a training analyst at the New York, you had a relatively large pool of ready-made candidates, patients to analyze. Naturally, everyone wanted to be one. So, here we go. They're all furious. But as one analyst who's written a history of psychoanalysis has told me, he said, the history of psychoanalysis has always been a mixture of growth on the one hand and fratricide on the other. Freud himself had famous fallings out with colleagues, Rank, Adler, Jung, Horney. Other institutes have been rocked by infighting as well. At the New York Psychoanalytic, there was a famous incident in 1941 when Karen Horney and a group of revisionists clashed with the ruling elite at a meeting over its orthodoxy. Horney and her cohort claimed that psychic development was not just a closed system in which the ego, id, and superego warred for dominance, as orthodox analysts claimed, but that culture had a powerful impact too on the psyche. Horney and others got so angry at the meeting, they stormed out, had a few drinks at the local bar, and literally marched down the street singing, "Let my people go." So bad was the fighting over the years that the American Psychoanalytic Association in 1983, that's the umbrella group for psychoanalysis, issued a report criticizing the place for destructive forms, for the unrelieved intensity of the fighting. The Institute committee that was set up to deal with the Americans' evaluation refused to even show the report to the members because they said it contained errors. The trustees demanded to see it. The committee refused. A fury resulted. Finally, the thing was rewritten and distributed. Then in 1985, for the first time ever, the trustees rejected a training analyst recommended by a faculty committee. Some said it was because the man had come to a meeting in a t-shirt and sneakers. Others said it was because he was too flamboyant. The faculty actually went on strike and refused to appoint any new training analysts at all. Eventually, tempers were soothed, the strike ended. But why would they behave like this? Well, one reason, as I said, is that by the time I wrote this article, psychoanalysis was shrinking, pardon the pun. And whenever any institution is in trouble, the infighting usually starts. And there's something inherent in the process itself. At the center of psychoanalysis is the concept of transference. Transference, the analyst is an anonymous, neutral figure the patient brings or transfers to him all the old loves and fears of his childhood. The situation at the New York was compounded by the fact that all the candidates and graduates had been or still were in psychoanalysis with the training analysts there. And a favorite guessing game used to be trying to figure out who was in psychoanalysis with whom. One clue was when a member's analyst walked down the aisle at a meeting, the member would blush. Then in 1985 came the lawsuit, charging the analyst with restraint of trade and monopolization. Medical doctors had been dominating psychoanalysis in America since the early part of the century, when the science, whatever you want to call it, was starting out. Doctors in America were just beginning to gain power and respectability, unlike their counterparts in Europe, who always had standing. And they wanted to keep the healing arts under their control. Many of the new psychoanalysts were refugees from Hitler. Psychoanalysis was a young science full of sex, longing, and dark impulses. The title doctor conferred dignity and respectability. There may have been a mercenary explanation for by controlling the supply of providers, psychoanalysts could keep the prices up. In 1989, they finally settled their lawsuit, and since then, psychologists and other qualified non-medical clinicians have been eligible to train at all the institutes of the American Psychoanalytic Association. Sadly, after my article was published, my friend, the female analyst who suggested it, and who hadn't expected her colleagues would begin fighting amongst themselves in the pages of New York Magazine, took umbrage at the piece, and our friendship ended. She was loyal to her profession and to its dignity. I, however, believed that journalists are the tribunes of the people. If someone informs you of something, you're obligated to print it. And I had discovered that psychoanalysts were human. And although psychoanalysis was supposed to be a healing art, psychoanalysts could be just as childish, nasty, brutish, gossipy, and mean as anyone else. And I say, in the end, though, isn't that one of the goals of analysis? To realize your shrink is human and to accept it. So what of analysis today? Though the number of MD analysts has shrunk, though fewer people are in what is called classical psychoanalysis, psychoanalysis still infuses talk therapy, whether it's delivered by medical doctors or social workers. And psychoanalysis, without question, has permeated every aspect of our lives. It's present in philosophy, in law, in literary criticism, in popular culture. Witness the hugely popular movie The Talking Cure with Keira Knightley, and the play Freud's Last Session, which is the longest-running off-Broadway production of this season. In many ways, psychoanalysis has taken its rightful place as philosophy rather than science, though efforts have been made to prove it has a biological basis. Scientists using functional magnetic resonance imaging say they've mapped the way psychic operations such as passion, reason, conscience occur in the neural circuits of the brain. And some scientists maintain that the brain has innate repressive mechanisms that protect us from disturbing thoughts and impulses. Whatever the case, I would maintain that psychoanalysis is in the end a deeply humanistic philosophy. I believe it flows directly from the Judeo-Christian tradition. It is forgiving, all-encompassing in its magnanimity. It gives understanding to those who violate social norms. It confers dignity on sufferers of mental illness and depression. And because of that, I would argue, psychoanalysis has elevated us and our world.
He promises he won't read for more than 4 hours. Roger Rosenblatt.
grateful to Denisha for a number of things. For one thing, defining me, which I had never really heard, with the phrase comic Jewish nightmare. I'm going to read from not from Making Toast, from Kayak Morning, which is coming out next month. And it makes reference to psychoanalysis indirectly through conversations that I had with Catherine Andrews, a psychotherapist, taking care of us and taking care of our grandchildren after our daughter died, and Ginny and I owe her a great deal. So I hope that comes through in the way that she propels this narrative. 2.5 years after our 38-year-old daughter Amy died of an undetected anomalous right coronary artery, I've taken up kayaking. They say that people in grief become more like themselves. I've always been a loner, so going out in a kayak suits my temperament. It also offers a solitude that is rare for me these days, because when Amy died, my wife Ginny and I moved into her house in Bethesda, Maryland, to help our son-in-law Harris care for their 3 small children, Jessica, Sammy, and James. We spend nearly all our time in Bethesda, but we also have kept our home in Quag, a summer village on the south shore of Long Island. It is not far from Stony Brook University, where I teach English and writing. I commute between Bethesda and Quag from September to June, and from June to September, whenever time allows, I go kayaking. Our oldest son, Carl, and his wife, Wendy, also have 3 children, Andrew, Ryan, and Nate. The family spends much of the summer together in Quag, as we did when Amy was alive. When I am more sure of myself with my kayak, I will take the kids out with me one at a time, sitting them between my legs as I paddle. It would be cool to see the water from the water's point of view, says Sammy, a serious-minded child. Early in the morning, I go out by myself. It is Sunday, June 27, 2010, just past dawn. At home, everyone is asleep, including our youngest son, John, who is visiting for the weekend. My boat scrapes on the public ramp. I dig my paddle into the pebbles in the shallow water and push off. Past a wooden dock jutting out into the creek and littered with parts of seashells strafed by gulls, smashed china on gray boards. Past the skeleton of a fish bobbing in the suds near a tuft of seagrass thick as a sheep's head. Past the orange buoy and the wet brown sand. A neap tide settles like a defeat. The sky is a blue stripe squeezed between 2 white layers of white clouds. Over the canal it turns gunmetal gray. Elegies of water could rain. Still waters, dark waters, watercolor, waterproof, watermark. To be in hot water, brackish water, white water, water main, water lilies, waterworks, waterfront, water bug, water cannon, water table, watershed, dead in the water. The duck blind sits unmoving, a gray-brown shack. I've never seen it used. Retired hitman, it sits with straw popping out on all sides in the wrong places like old men's hair. 30 yards or so from the marshes and the shore on the east side of the creek. Above it rise trees of 100 greens, thick as privet hedges. Bright green, purple green, green descending to black, pale green, nearly white. White oaks, willows, pitch pines, tupelo trees whose branches stick out at a 90-degree angle. One dead tree, the color of ashes, rises among them like a corkscrew. The trees are tall where the creek comes to a point and grow shorter and sparser where it widens at the canal. 3 or 4 solitary trees appear on the promontory at a distance from one another. One is flattened at the top like the desert date trees I saw in Sudan in 1992 when I was writing a story on the Lost Boys for Vanity Fair. Half hidden in the foliage are houses, summer places, most of them sprawling with additions. One of the larger houses has a flagpole on its lawn. I read The Wind by the American flag flapping and clanking against the pole. Big houses, substantial and confident houses. The creek rolls to them and away. Elsewhere, great herds of bathers soon will gallop on the nearby ocean beaches, calling out to one another in loud patrician voices and complaining about a slice of swordfish scorched on the grill last night. They will organize their lives into committees under yellow and white beach umbrellas, while the sea rears up against its rains. On the creek, I am the crowd. I and the birds and the insects and the fish. Beneath me lie the Gothic rocks in their dark museums. The minnows move in fits and starts. The banded killifish explode upward like sparks from a bonfire in the evening. Powerboats ride at anchor on the west side of the creek, halfway between the canal and the public ramp. They belong to members of the Shinnecock Yacht Club, founded in 1887, merely a smallish house and a dock with a few slips. There are 9 boats anchored in the creek today. None is oversized or showy, thus all are showy in the way of quag, which often makes a vice of modesty. The boats are still, as are the egrets that congregate on the dock. They stand together but seem not to acknowledge one another. It is difficult to determine their policy. On the rocks above the public ramp, a rust-brown dinghy lies upside down, looking like a sea lion lolling in the sun. Nearby, a bush presents a small bouquet of pink and violet flowers. J.M. Singh had a phrase for such a picture, the splendid desolation of decay. The pilings of the various docks stick up like periscopes. The sky has turned gray and white clouds rising into the gray. The moon leaves a trace as a chalky eye. White the pebbles, white the tips of the waves, white the weeds, birds wheeling in the wind, the squeak of gulls. It colors everything I do, I said. What did you expect, said my friend. I'm in a box. Isn't that what grief is? You're the doctor, you tell me. What do you want, she says. I want out. What do you really want? I want her back. Well, she said, you'll have to find a way to get her back. Opposites attract me. In kayaking, taking the opposite way can save your life. When you feel you are about to capsize, you instinctively clutch the gunwales of the boat. You think that the kayak offers stability on an unstable surface, but you are part of the boat when it rolls, and grabbing the sides merely adds mass to the problem. You must use your paddle to support the boat, extending it into the water and holding it face down, because in this instance, the water is more stable than the boat. And to do this maneuver correctly, you have to lean into the paddle, which will put you off balance. When you are completely off balance, so much so that you are certain you will topple over, you bring the paddle down hard on the water's surface, the way ducks bat their wings. You will feel your kayak right itself. Only by moving in the direction you least trust can you be saved. Anomaly, deviation or departure from the normal or common order, peculiar, irregular, difficult to classify, aberrant. Cloud ghosts pass along the skull of the sky. 2 gulls wheel by together. A single-engine plane drones eastward. Purposeful little bugger that makes a beeline. The sun is a blur, a slowing pulse. The water looks shellacked. I poke about at the shore where the creek has worn lines in the rocks. The rocks bear evidence of the creek. If the creek should dry up, the rocks would know it existed. The moon slides out of sight in its secret night. I am contained in my boat. Form rescues content. All I have to keep me afloat, all I've ever had, is writing. In 2008, I wrote an essay in the New Yorker about our family after Amy's death. A year later, I expanded the piece into a book, Making Toast. In it, I tried to suggest that the best one can do in a situation such as ours is to get on with it. I believe that still. What I fail to calculate is the pain that increases even as one gets on with it. The response to the book indicated how many others have experienced similar losses and feelings. I have received nearly 1,000 letters from people telling me their stories and wishing our family well. The letters keep coming. Everybody grieves. A woman approached me on the street in New York. I had never seen her before. I read your book, she said. I'm sorry for your loss, I said. Be kind, for everyone you meet is carrying a great burden. Philo. Sunday morning in church-going quag is as quiet as the grave. Impossible not to think of Sunday morning, such a strange poem. The ambiguity of the title, Wallace Stevens on the inadequacies of a Christian conscience. His 2 ladies, his wife and his dying mother, aloof and untouchable, but oh so pious. Everything and everyone unattainable, the past unattainable, and the importance of Sunday morning associated with going to Sunday school and going to church. He needed to understand the women in his life. He needed to believe. All these themes swimming about in the complex poem. Yet for the reader, the images are plenty. Complacencies of the peignoir and late coffee and oranges in a sunny chair and the green freedom of a cockatoo. I do my thinking with my senses. Here the ducks wettle out in their crazy syntax. The swans sail by with mud on their keels. The tides rummage with the pebbles. The sunlight hones the edges of the whited houses, etching a guillotine blade on the walls. What I liked about Stevens was his rage for order, things as they should be, everyone in his place. You have to understand, she said, grief lasts forever. Like death, I said, like death. Except death is someone else's condition and grief is all yours. I feel worse now than I did shortly after she died. And you'll feel worse next year, and worse the year after that, unless you find a way to transform your grief. We're back to that. We've never left it, she said. Grief comes to you all at once, so you think it'll be over all at once, but it is your guest for a lifetime. How should I treat this guest, this unwelcome, uninvited guest? Think of the one who sent it to you, she said. No man is an island, but I do my best. Never exactly smooth in social situations. Lately I have become so much worse. I sympathize with anyone burdened with my companionship. At a dinner party the other night, why did I go? Why did they ask me? I was seated between two women. The woman to my right I have known episodically for 35 years. Her husband is a political journalist. I asked her if he was still writing. Don't you read the papers, she said. I told her I do not. I then turned to the woman on my left, whom for the entire evening I called by the name of the woman on my right. The two women might as well have been seated beside a hedgehog. Such occasions bother me less, not at all in fact, than the lack of attention I give my friends when we get together. I listen and I nod, but I'm not in it, as one is in a kayak, for example. I sometimes feel that death is contagious. I can pollute others with my sorrow. It is a lot to ask of people to add your despair to their own. Because my friends love me, they understand and forgive my deposed state of mind. I recognize the kindness in their eyes. When they suffered deaths in the family, I saw the gauze over their faces. Now they see mine. I sometimes feel that I betray them being out of things. More often I feel ridiculous, like a hedgehog. Whereas the social life of the creek is busy. The double-crested cormorant has no oil on its feathers, which allows it to dive deep for bunkerfish, or it stands with its wings spread wide like the angel of death and watches. Everything chases something else. Bluefish drive shiners into shallow water. Their location is noted by the snowy egret, the great blue heron, such stature. The mud bulges, throbs. Killifish congregate near the shore. They are prey to blue-claw crabs, which are prey to crows, gulls, and us. Everything lives here. A man I know found a seahorse clinging to a rope on his crab trap. Fluke and flounder in the creek, dragonflies and damselflies that pull back their wings when they land. Crows that caw, mob, and dive bomb the northern harriers, and marsh hawks and osprey that threaten them. A pair of osprey is building a nest at the mouth of the creek. The barn swallows and the purple martins feed on insects that feed on us. The mussels look asleep, but they siphon the water of microorganisms. Snakes, rabbits, and mice on the prowl. Trees crack and tumble, muskrats gnaw at the stumps. Even the plants are busy. Vines called bittersweet open into bright orange stars and glom onto bushes. At night, if you're lucky, the comb jellies will light your way and glow like music in the dark. Look. The creek lives. The household you left lives. Your husband, children, your brothers, friends, the kids, teachers, your old professors, colleagues, patients, the store clerk at Nordstrom's, the Terminix man, your mother, me. Look, I've been calling your name. Your name lives. See here, Amy. There's little point in making mistakes unless you make the same mistakes over and over. One wants to get good at it. The trick is to recognize and seize the opportunities. I've had so many close calls when I had a habitual mistake in the palm of my hand and nearly let it slip away. Experience helps. With you, on the other hand, I did the right thing once in a while. My behavior improved from time to time. Occasionally, I was impressive, someone to look up to. Clearly, I was not myself. You were a disruptive influence. Now, who is there to lead me astray? What we are, what we cannot be, what we want, what we don't, what we question, what we accept, what we remember, what we forget or remember too late. What we did not do, what we fear, what we brave, what we create, what we destroy, that is kill, what we had, what we lost, what we are, what we were. In the Quag Wildlife Refuge, they've got a great horned owl in a big dark cage. He perches in the back, looking like a man who never leaves his men's club. He naps and waits for night, opening an eye from time to time to check out the curiosity seekers who come to look at him, not a rabbit or squirrel among them. He closes the eye again. A dead white mouse droops across a raised pole in the cage like an old sock. It's just skin now. The owl would rather be out here where the creek is, free to do his thing. You don't see many owls in the daytime, but at night they open their great wings and wheel across fields and woods, taking soundings. They fear nothing. I saw one as I was driving back from Bethesda one night last winter. The radio was blasting Sting. The owl ignored me. He had killing on his mind. The one in the cage to whom white mice are delivered like room service. Does he still feel like a killer? Or is his life so changed that he no longer thinks of himself as he once was, no matter how many people, not to mention the sign on his cage, assure him that he is indeed the great horned owl? A bone of solace, waiter, please. My father told me of a time when he was a young doctor waiting for a train at a country station. Two young men in a convertible tried to make it across the tracks as the train approached. The wheels caught and spun. The train hit the car straight on, leaving the young men crushed in their seats. As my father hurried to them, they were talking as if something minor had occurred. They apologized for the accident. My father surmised that when the train hit them, endorphins were released to block their agony. The young men chatted away, and then they died. The sky's grayness is diffuse as it is in concrete or in stone. On such a morning, I imagine pioneers rolled west in clunky wagons, or Edison tested his incandescent light bulb, or Yeats looked up and dreamed a swan. The past looks like this, gray. I clamber down a ladder and peer in, but all I see is a leprous light with cardboard figures in the wrong places. Memory is sluggish, like a donkey in the briar, is born to fail. At any rate, something may be redeemed in this attempt to get back one clear picture before night falls. The paddle dips to its own rhythm. It buries itself in the welcoming water. I look up like a puppy, eager for a sign. A friend was surprised one night when I mentioned I had never envied anyone. I did not mean that as a point of pride. Envy corrupts innocence, the innocence of the one who feels envy and that of its object. Enough has been said of the dead, but I am certain they do not feel envy, least of all of the living. They may feel longing, which is different. Oh, what the hell, isn't everything dead? Nations are made up of the dead, myths extol the dead, laws and policies dead. The old lies dead as doornails, the doornails dead, and the screws and the boards and the bricks. Sentiments dead, the statues of the dead in the parks, the anthems and parades and the wars and the war dead. The dead are in the old movies and in the old songs and the books, on the plaques and in the portraits and the galleries which do are dead. The names on the street signs, the names of the living, all dead. You stomp around in gardens of ashes. What do you say, big man? Are you up for a trade? One of those cloak and dagger swaps they used to make at the Berlin Wall, one double agent for another? Suppose I told you that I possessed valuable information, including dates and photographs and maps on microfilm. Are you game? Tell you what, I'll wait in the back of the car, hidden from the soldiers patrolling the gates, till you decide. How goes the cemetery in winter, I wonder? I haven't been there then but twice. The first time was in December, which was the first time for you as well. The second on the first anniversary. Since then I have gone only in the warmer months, I don't know why. The facts do not change according to the seasons. Do the squirrels form a cortege to amuse themselves? Do the birds, their prairies extending forever, complain about the paucity of seeds? The deer, the paucity of flowers? My heart patrols the graves of others as I check out your neighborhood. Ice padlocks the sepulchres, the frozen earth as numb as stone. You lie beneath the obscene folds of snow. Another day in paradise, said the girl with the bright blue eyes as she passed me in Southampton the other morning. Instead of saying, will you cloak me in your arms and shield me from the killing sun? Another day in paradise, I answered her, instead of saying, yes, of course, and from the rain and from the sleet. Here's an unusual fact. Water is the earth's only self-renewing resource. It heals itself. I told a class of mine, writing makes sorrow endurable, evil intelligible, justice desirable, and love possible. I talk the talk. For some 7 hours now I have been out here. I could go the whole day, into the evening, into the night. I am not alone after all. The sky and the water are with me, the insects and the birds, they are with me impersonally. See that thrush half hidden in a tangle of leaves, the red berry beside it, and that yellow wildflower, and that one? Hardly alone. What am I trying to recall? Death is soundproof, silence unspeakable. I am part of the silence of my silence. The heart yearns in silence. The mind rages in silence, decides in silence, betrays in silence. The conscience roils, plots, lies in silence. In silence, the rumination, the meditation, the vow. We search in silence, war in silence, regret in silence. We love in silence. Think of that. Our daughter dies, and there are those who carried her. I shall die, and there will be those who carry me on and on down the cobblestones of the village, through the swales of the dunes, on and on we bear one another into the bruised dark waters. The burden of the generations, the burden of burdens, past the heaving rib cage and the bloodshot eye, remembering, forgetting, and remembering again. We are what we never were, hardly alone. At the end of the morning, everything is calm and slow-moving. I feel the cold breath of the sea. A transparent worm disappears into a wave. A great blue heron parks itself on a dock across the canal and looks seaward, as if trying to remember something. There's just enough wind to make one appreciate it. Fish caught and released nurse their bloodless wounds. Let the shiners chatter, let the wind touch me. Let the crabs hide, let the mussels hide. Let the jellyfish bloom, let the clouds shift. Let the ripples from a small boat embrace the waters of the world. Why did you write Making Toast, she said. It was therapy. As long as I was writing about Amy, I could keep her alive. What about afterwards? When the book was finished, it was as if she had died again. The book isn't enough, she said. No, it's not enough. So what do you do now? Write another book? There has to be something more lasting than a book. And what would that be, she said. Last night, Ginny ordered candles. I watched her through the opening of one room into another. She spoke into the phone and asked the man in the candle shop if he had a certain candle she likes with a 4-inch diameter. As she spoke, she was standing beside a lit candle in a brass holder and was illuminated by its flickering light. On the wall behind her was the seascape I had bought her in Soho. Through the window of the setting sun flecked part of the painting with patches of gold which looked like candles in the water. Ginny's voice was soft, as it always is. Evidently, the candle shop had the one she wanted. I did not realize that she knew I was observing her. But just then she looked at me and smiled. And love possible. I remember now. It was on the beach, and we were all there, all of us intact, and I was holding Jessie's hand at the lip of the ocean. Here comes a wave, there it goes. Will it touch our knees, or our ankles, or our toes? And Jessie squealed, our toes. And above us, perched on the dune, was Amy, smiling. She was watching Jessie and me, and she was happy. Drifting again, I looked down into the water of my birth, of our birth. The fluid in our body is the salt of our blood. A white gull poses on the dock of the yacht club, fresh as a girl. A blue claw crab settles on a stone at the base of the dock. He is done with prowling for a while. A dubious duck treads on a gray slab on the shore above, its brown and gray down lifted by a breeze. A dragonfly threads a course among the reeds. My hands close on the air in an unconscious prayer. In every heartbreak, beauty intrudes. I am willing to be taken. The wind touches my wrists. I hear the caterwauling of the crows. I taste and smell the clammy air. I see everything. Art does not make up a life. Experience does not make up a life. And death does not make up a life either. I don't see why eternity has to last forever. Those whom I have loved and who have loved me, no matter what happened to dilute that love or to cool it or even to drown it, I should like to gather them all on that far shore and thank them. They were my life. Love conquers death. No celestial jury will bring Amy back to me. I will not see her either, no matter how many others want me to. She will not talk to me. But in the time since she died, I have been aware every minute of my love for her. She lives in my love. This morning when I climbed into my kayak and headed out, I knew I would be going nowhere, as I have been going nowhere for the past 2.5 years. But my love for my daughter makes somewhere out of nowhere. In this boat, on this creek, I am moving forward, even if I am moving in circles. Amy returns in my love, alive and beautiful. I have her still. Grief, the state of mind brought about when love, having lost to death, learns to breathe beside it. See also love. I aim my boat toward the shore. Thank you.
Stunning. But don't sit down. Come back. Questions. I just want to, as you're coming up, I want to thank Roger, especially for being in part of the inspiration for this series. Last summer, both he and David Rakoff read pieces about their relationships with their therapist, and thus the series was born.
It's always nice when crazy people do something. All questions for Denisha about math, and then I will answer all the other questions.
I don't know anything about math. I think under the site, it should be addressed to him, but if you have any questions that I can answer.
Do any of the therapists in the room want to ask questions of Denisha about the New York psychoanalysis?
I met a therapist crazy enough to want to take our courses. There she is.
You're right. And I can see a few. I happen to know our therapist.
I'll ask a question, Roger. That riff about dead, death, stunning. Like, did that come of a piece, or was that something you whittled down from?
You know, Didion knows this better than I, and all the writers in the room know it. You get on a roll of a tone, and then ideas occur to you that never occurred to you before. The tone almost carries everything that else you write. So, suddenly the word dead starts to spawn all the things that are dead. I remember there was I don't think it inspired me, but maybe it was lurking. Russell Baker wrote a hilarious column years ago about everybody being dead. And he was listening to dead Frank Sinatra. So it may have lurked in there.
This may not be an easy question for you to answer, but I'll pose it. If you had to make a choice between where you got the greatest solace around your loss, namely from spending time alone on the kayak or spending time with your therapist talking about your loss, could you tell us which of those two?
Yeah, I'm not a good candidate for therapy. I think I'm too far gone. Though I was telling Genevieve, who bored me to death on our ride in, I didn't know you were still here, that I only saw a psychiatrist when my dad died, and he was such a nutcase himself that I swore off him. But I must say, and Ginny will confirm this, that Catherine Andrews, the psychotherapist for our 3 grandchildren, has been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. She knows her subject, which helps. It's a real subject, you know, it's not chatter. She's very kind, and she's just as smart as can be, and I don't know, you know. Denisha said something wonderful about at the end about this, what we expect of a therapist, not different from what I expect of a friend or some very good person, and she is that. So I got a lot out of her, but generally I am a loner, and I'm out on the creek with my kayak. I just asked as many questions as I could and felt comfortable there. I don't know that one is preferable. Preferable, pal, would be never to have been in the situation.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is therapist.
Oh, I'm always going to ask you, although I'm so like ready to just cry.
Yeah, I'm a downer. I don't know why.
No. It was
It's hard
very,
after this.
yeah, very moving for those of us who can relate to a lot of what you were saying. But Dinisha, you approached it with a lot of humor, the whole thing. So I just, which I appreciated. Can you address something about that lens?
Why did
for
I
you?
use the humor?
Or yeah, just.
You know, frankly, it was just to amuse. I mean, I do hope I conveyed at the end what I feel.
Yes.
Is that, you know, it is a philosophy that's elevated us. I do feel that. And it provides this forgiveness that is part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, but the humor, they were pretty funny. I mean,
But it's such a brilliant observation, the idea of a profession, and which I don't know how many of you have thought of it, until Denisha said it, I certainly didn't think of it, devoted to intelligent forgiveness, not easy forgiveness, and not superstitious forgiveness, but thoughtful forgiveness. It's a wonderful idea.
yeah, if you can achieve it. But they were pretty funny because when I met them, you know, I was in analysis myself, and you know, my analyst was actually a rather humorous fellow, but it was amazing to walk in that room and suddenly they were all quarreling, that bastard, you know. And I'm like, I'm just a reporter. But they're very isolated, you know, they don't have a lot of, there's a sort of closed system there. Now they're very different.
Yes. Yeah, the field has changed enormously since then. So that's what I thought was wonderful about the humor, because it is like it's kind of that little system that way is kind of dead in the water, to use your phrase.
I think it
and
is.
Psychoanalysis at this point is this relational and open and incorporating things from so many, you know, from infant studies to Buddhism to, you know, it's just to neuroscience and so forth. So it's a very alive field at the moment in a way that your humorous take on it, I felt was
what?
Well, I felt was appropriate. I thought it was I felt it was appropriate for something that no longer is, and yet gave birth to so much and changed us as a people so much.
Well, Freud used to go he was great on jokes. He was a good joker.
Yeah.
He had a great sense of humor. He used to go for walks with his patients. He'd give them food.
Yeah.
You know. So maybe it's sort of gotten back to its roots, because he was not that kind of analyst.
Might have been a better candidate if I had Freud as a doctor.
He could feed you.
Yeah.
I was telling Genevieve, and Jenny remembers this guy I went to after my dad died. I thought he was kind of a jerk at the beginning, but I also didn't know much about it, so I thought maybe, you know, I'm just being impatient as usual, and then come on. And I'm waiting outside his office, and I hear him yelling at his wife for some minor infraction. And I thought, what the hell? I mean, that was the end of that.
That was really fun. There's another one over there.
Andrew.
Yeah, the concept of getting perspective by going out in a kayak and being by yourself, and then very perceptively seeing that how you live is who you love and who has loved you. But if you speaking from my own experience, if you get out on a kayak and you spend too much time out there, you can sort of spin out to the edge. And so once you've made those realizations, there has to be a balance of getting back with the people, the survivors, the loved ones, the children.
So right. And as a matter of fact, there was a kind of accidental thing. Ordinarily, I would like to get out of that creek, you know that creek, and just head out to the canal and then go. But for the mornings I was doing this, when I came to the canal, almost intuitively, I would turn back into the creek. It's not a big creek, it's not a big body of water, but it's big enough to move around and think in. And I think I was unconsciously doing what you say. I was returning rather than leaving. And it's interesting, among the Greeks and the others, as we know, the idea of leaving a place always had an idea of returning home. Odysseus was always returning home, and all the other explorers and all the other heroes were returning home. Not in America. In America, it was always keep going.
Go west.
You know, keep going. Lewis and Clark and all the others, just go, go, go. And I found that less satisfying than returning home, where the home to which you return is never the same anymore.
One other question I had was, what you read seemed all of a piece. It seemed almost complete. Like there doesn't need to be any more before that or after that. So what else is there?
If you applied that standard to all of us here, we'd be goners. Yeah, the rest is filler, if that's what you're implying.
Kayak trips, are there other things? I mean, where do we go from there?
Yeah, no, he's.
That's it. You mean where did it go from there? No, I mean that's it for me. I go in various directions in the book towards literature and towards memories and things like that. But I just distilled it down to what I thought was the essence of the book. Hey, Maggie. Maggie's a psychotherapist.
There we are.
And a real nutcase, too.
This was so splendid. I wanted to ask you, when you introduced your piece, you said you started it in the late 80s, I think?
Yes, I did.
And then you updated it.
For this occasion.
Yeah, I wondered if you could just talk about the process of that.
Of updating it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd be pleased. I was nervous because I did actually, they asked me to read it, and I was worried that, why was I going to read something that was so old? But I thought, well, okay, let's see what's happening. So I called them. I called the psychoanalysts, and they were not happy to hear from me. They remembered. Well, most of the people in the story are dead because they were older, and but the senior guys, and the analysts. Well, you love this as a former journalist yourself. I wrote to the analyst who's in charge of press relations a note, and I called her, she didn't answer, and finally a guy gets back to me who says he's the press person for the Institute, but there are so many requests that he's not sure he can supply me with information. I mean, this is it, they're inundated. Inundated with people, and in fact, I don't think they are. Well, he was a lay person, he was rather sweet. But that was one thing I did. And then I talked to the American, which is the umbrella group. And that's how I updated. And then I thought about it. I did a lot of thinking about what did I really feel about analysis. And, what was, its impact in the culture. And I thought about deconstruction. And even though it's, to many of us, it's already on its way out. But yet it's profound. It couldn't have happened without psychoanalysis. And Derrida's wife was a psychoanalyst. And so our understanding of texts is very changed, I think. That's one way. And then if you look at the law, and so I thought about it. That's how I did it.
Thank you.
That's great.
I'm curious what maybe it's not proper to ask this or for you to respond, I don't know, but I'm curious about what you thought about Joan Didion's memoir.
I never read it.
You didn't read the one about her husband
I
and
did not.
or any of that? Okay.
It's actually fascinating. I'm just wondering, Denisha, about kind of conflicts between all the participants. You're a reporter calling Psychoanalytic Institute 10 years later about a story you wrote that kind of outed them at the time.
14 years later.
14 years later.
No, 20.
You lost it.
24.
Yeah.
Oops. 24 years later.
You lost a friend over this article.
Oh, I did. That was a very big moment.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering about the kind of boundaries between kind of, I don't know whether it's professional ethics or kind of professionals, where here you have an institute that's kind of bound to privacy.
Yes.
And here you are, journalists who are committed to openness.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, it seems like a lot of different groups clashing.
It was. I was very sorry to lose my friend. She was a very fine woman, and she was very loyal to her profession, and she had suggested it. If you're asking me a question about ethics.
I'm not sure what I'm asking. It's
Well,
just it seems like all these different worlds are kind of colliding around this piece.
Well, it was. My view is that, as I said, the journalists are the tribunes of the people. No matter what the cost is, except the loss of a human life, your impulse, your drive is to reveal what is. Nothing should be hidden, which doesn't mean that I don't believe you should hide things from people, or that, but I certainly believe, as at the times where I worked for many years, you know, when Bill Keller would get inundated by the CIA because something we were going to publish was going to result in a death, and he would hold it back, and I agreed with his decision. But I was sorry to lose my friend, and it was a very interesting clash. She had no idea when she suggested this that I was going to encounter these people so angry at each other. That's important. She didn't know. And I was sitting there, and they started, you know, quarreling in the pages of New York Magazine. I couldn't imagine not writing it. Is that what your question was?
Yeah, no, it's just interesting.
Yeah, I was sorry to see her go.
Small question. The metaphor for keeping your boat steady, was that something that you had been like sitting on and noticing for a while?
Yeah.
Or did it come to you as you were writing? And when you have the self-deprecating asides, I'm wondering if they come out as easily and naturally as the rest of the writing. Because when you read, why did I go? Why did they invite me? It just seems like it pours out like.
It did. That one did.
Yeah.
Not all of them do. But I always think of that. I mean, if I were anybody, I wouldn't invite me anywhere. It's exactly as why are you thinking of me? Why would you want me at a party? Everything I said was just dead on. Jenny knows because she was at the same thing. This woman, I started to talk to her. I didn't know what I was doing. She was disgusted with me. Turned to the woman on my left, called her by the name of the woman on my right. What a delightful social companion I am.
Well, I will say I've met you a few times over the years, and self-deprecation is sort of ironic thing. It seems to come very naturally.
It does come naturally, just as swimming does to a fish, and if you actually have the things, you're really quite good at it.
Go back to the boat thing.
Oh yeah, the boat.
The boat thing.
Thank you. Was that something that came to you as you were writing, or were you?
No, I knew it. I saw it. I haven't been kayaking in a long time. Botsford still won't go with me, and now he never will go with me. But
You gotta be alone, right?
well, I like it. I like to be alone this summer, but you know, at my age, you don't take up new sports very easily. So this was a lot of fun. But I just watched it, you know, and saw how the boat moves and that kind of thing, and then applied it to what I was writing.
That's a good question.
One more question?
You said that you were taken with the phrase intelligent forgiveness, that's what therapy does. So why forgiveness?
Well, that's why I was struck by that, because I wish I knew more about the process. But if I were seeking, I'll tell you an example. When Making Toast was about to come out, a lot of things occurred to me. One was that I knew it would be a success, which is a very awful thing to know about a book ahead of time. But I knew from the New Yorker piece and the response to that, and I wasn't pleased by what I was thinking, because I was starting to think of it as another book. You know? So when we went to Catherine, I told her this. You know, I said, "This is. He feels to me like cheapening the whole business. And she said I was thinking of it all wrong, that I should think of it, first of all, as something that was valuable to our grandchildren, and I think it will be. But more interestingly, that I should think of it as something that Amy and I were doing together. Now, when she said that, maybe that's the definition of intelligent forgiveness. I wanted to know that my place in the world was not outside the world. If forgiveness has that implication, I don't mean that the forgiveness of a church or the forgiveness of a clergyman, or I mean a kind of, I suppose I'm thinking of forgiveness for being a human being with some different ideas or thoughts. Somebody who seems outside the pale, and then the therapist tells you by implication nobody's outside the pale. And so feeling that, I changed my mind entirely about the book, and I was glad to have done it because of the wisdom of the woman who said what she said.
Thank you. So proud of the writers who participated in this series, and I think this was a wonderful culmination to a semester-long project. I wish you all a very happy holidays. Go see Dorothy Marchick's plays in its 10th week, and it's ongoing. I'd like to thank Susanna Phillip and Patrick Dunn for working the event, and please go get a book and get it signed. So thank you all very much. And